So it's kind of like this manga criolla. It's like a sancocho. You're bringing in these Asian and these Latin ingredients to kind of create our own version of something that is familiar yet still unique and new. And I think that was kind of like the direction I chose to do. And from a marketing standpoint, I studied the market, I understood the market, I respected it, and said, so this is how I should approach it. Still being authentic to the stories I've been telling over this last decade, and also be authentic and respectful to the medium and genre of storytelling of manga. And I think that's what we were able to accomplish with this. And I think moving forward is going to continue to be a case study of how to look at the synergy between cultures, between markets that oftentimes people wouldn't necessarily see.
In the world of comic books, characters are often described as immortal. But for Edgardo Miranda-Rodriguez, immortality isn't just about living forever, it's about staying relevant to the people who need to see themselves reflected in a hero. When he created La Borinqueña, he wasn't just launching a graphic novel, he was launching a movement. By blending the vibrant traditions of Puerto Rico with a fierce commitment to social justice, Edgardo has turned a fictional character into a real-world force for philanthropy, raising over $250K for grassroots organizations. Today, we're talking about the power of the empathetic artist, the rise of intergenerational storytelling, and why authenticity is the only currency that matters in today's crowded media landscape. I'm Luz Corona, and this is Campaign Chemistry. Buenos dias, Edgardo. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Luz. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited
Yeah,
to have this conversation with you.
I'm so excited. I apologize in advance to our listeners. I was telling you, I'm going to be fangirling a little bit. I'm going to try my hardest to focus this conversation today, but I'm going to try to balance it between what marketers can learn and like how the hell you came up with these genius ideas. So that's the focus for today.
Dale, dale.
um, yeah, but Edgardo, tell us a little bit, for any listeners, I obviously have learned about your work over the past couple of years, but I want this audience to know about you and your work. So like kind of like do your best to sum up who you are and what you have brought into this world through La Borinqueña.
I guess the best way to describe it in my elevator pitch is I am a storyteller that is invested in transformative storytelling that can engage audiences so that we can see our shared humanity. And then I do that through these superhero graphic novels that I've been independently publishing now for a decade. This is our 10th anniversary. And kind of literally using the model of superhero storytelling to remind people that these characters are tethered to social justice. So the stories should not only reflect that, but the work outside of the panels and pages should. And that's why we've created a philanthropic project called the La Borinqueña Grant Awards, which gives us the opportunity to engage nonprofits throughout Puerto Rico through charity work. So we literally take the social justice out of the pages of the comics and bring it into the real life by honoring real superheroes. So I guess that's kind of like the model that I've created. It's entrepreneurial, but it's also philanthropic as well.
My goodness, that's amazing. And I'm going to ask you a question you've probably been asked a million times before in your decade experience, but obviously you must have seen a white space, to kind of fill with this world that you've created. Like, what was that aha moment that kind of you were like, no, I need to like build this world out and drive action through it and things like that. Can you tell us about that?
My aha moment was like the end of 2015 when I was following a lot of the news that was coming out of Puerto Rico with the debt crisis. Then Governor Padilla had announced that Puerto Rico had amassed close to an $80 billion debt that was going to be unpayable. And that led to an economic crisis that the Obama administration had to literally create this initiative, this fiscal management board on Promesa, which is also celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, to manage the debt. But it was endemic to Puerto Rico's colonial status because its fiscal management board did not give any actual elected official from Puerto Rico a vote to decide what should be the self-determination of Puerto Ricanos. And as many listeners may or may not know, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, those living in Puerto Rico, 3 million plus, are U.S. citizens, can serve in the U.S. military, pay taxes, sir, but are not allowed to vote for president. So their president is President Trump. They have a governor, and they have a resident commissioner who sits in Congress, but literally sits on their hands because they're not allowed to vote. So when that crisis came up, I thought to myself, I'm Gen X, so I grew up seeing a lot of like pop artists create art for social change and social awareness. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not a singer. I'm not an actor. What's my lane? And I had just did a book with Marvel, and I decided that that was going to be my first and last book with them. And so I thought, well, what can I do? And I said, I love superhero storytelling. There's a big void for Latinx representation in this space that isn't performative, that isn't tokenism, that is lacking authentic narratives and an authentic voice. And I said, caramba, that's it. And
Mhm.
that's where La Borinqueña came. And I created a very traditional story, even with the costume design, even with a cape, right? And that vehicle 10 years later has become a platform for me to do my advocacy work, my charity work, my cultural education, not only in Puerto Rico and across the United States, but internationally. I've done like workshops via the Department of State in Bolivia and Venezuela. Um, in Costa Rica, I'm traveling to Costa Rica to participate at a festival there to teach um, people attending this arts festival about how comics can be a transformative art form, not only to tell stories, but to enact social change. And so that was like my aha moment. That it was really in 2015, and then I moved in with this idea, launched her at the Puerto Rican Day Parade in 2016, literally on a float, and had a young
Wow.
woman who had just graduated law school cosplay as her. Met Rosario Dawson for the first time at the parade, and she was like completely vibing. And she and I become friends ever since then. She even made her own La Borinqueña costume, appeared in one of our books as herself,
Yeah,
and
she's a big supporter of you guys.
huge supporter and a really authentic friend. And our friendship has even transcended beyond working with La Borinqueña because she and my partner, Kyung John Miranda, both have endometriosis. So the two of them have become very vocal for women's health and have even actually worked together on a documentary called Below the Belt, which Rosario Dawson is an executive producer of, and Kyung John Miranda is actually a featured subject in. So it's been this space that I saw that was like there, and I thought, I need to do something in my own way, in a way that felt comfortable to me, in a way that felt authentic to me, and in a way that I felt that I could truly manage in all honesty, the production value of it. I wanted it to look good. I wanted it to read well. And like Kyung told me when I first started working on this, she was like, make sure it's not corny. That's my
Yeah.
mantra, making sure it's not corny.
Yeah, no, far from corny, I would say. And I love that this world and this like creation that you made has also just introduced you to other good people who are kind of on the same page about advocacy, and using your art for that. I would love to learn a little bit about La Borinqueña herself. I know you were showing us the dolls. Can you hold those up to the camera? We got to show these on
So this is
social.
the action figure. People who are hardcore toy collectors love the highly articulated figures because they can pose them in any way. And then we even have for the old school collectors, muñecas. So if you want to, you can style her hair. You can take it to a Dominican beauty salon to get her hair straightened if you want, I guess. So we have two different styles, and it's something super excited because we were able to launch an action figure line with characters that are all of color, all of Caribbean heritage, all Latinx, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that's never been done before. And also like products that here's our Dominican superhero, Dominican Chinese superhero, Luz. Tu
There we
tocayo.
go.
There you
Look,
go. That's
I
your
never look
namesake,
better.
right? And these characters, when people buy these action figures, they literally give a portion of the sales to our continued charity work. This character was co-created with me and my youngest son. He was 5. He's actually 10 now. So this character is called Oro el Coquirorado. And every superhero needs a bad guy. So this is La Gargola, and
Wow.
yeah, so it's really exciting. I love toys. The camera's not looking at my toy collection, but trust me, there's too much plastic in this office right behind me.
I love it. I have a little collector at home too. He's got like the Funko Pops and all that, so I got to introduce him to La Borinqueña to add to his collection. So tell me about her and just kind of like her role. Obviously, she's the main character, you know, and what you wanted to embody in this character that kind of is the nucleus of this world that you built.
So what's really cool about comic book storytelling is that characters are evergreen. They're immortal. They literally are frozen in time. So when I wrote her 10 years ago, she was 19, 20, kind of like a junior in college. She still is. She's not pushing
Yeah.
30 now. She's still, in college. Her stories have kind of like um developed over this last decade, but I really wanted her to be a young person that was in this unique space between childhood and adulthood. And I felt college was like the first place where you kind of experienced that, right? Because you're like right on the cusp of becoming an adult, but you're still like, mommy, I need some money to buy some, stuff for school, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's also, particularly if you have the chance to go away, it's really when you really explore who you are for the first time. Many of us kind of like live under the ideologies and even philosophies of our families. But when we're alone studying and meeting all of these scholars that are opening our minds to different ways of thinking and learning, we start developing our own voice, our own ideology. So I thought that was the perfect place for a young person to become a superhero. And she's an environmental studies student from Columbia University who moves to Puerto Rico to continue her studies. That was very intentional because many young people who are Gen Z are very, very, very aware of climate change. And, we're literally seeing climate disasters and climate related weather freak occurrences internationally. So young people are much more aware of that. So making her a student and making her someone who studies environmental studies and making her someone who is kind of like always in this space of youth, embracing her youth, I felt was more relevant, believe it or not, than even her superpowers. So creating her as Marisol, which is her alter ego, for me was more important than just focusing on the powers. And then once that character for me was kind of like concretized, that's when I moved into the space of like, so where do her powers come from? And I looked at mythologies, and all superheroes are tied to Greek, Roman, Norse mythologies. The Bible they're inspired by. And I thought to myself, well, let's look at the Caribbean. And that's when I learned about Tainos, the indigenous people of the Greater Antilles, and how they had their own cosmology and their own beliefs. They believed in semis, who are these spirits. And these semis are tethered to the elements. So I thought, well, there we go. That's where her powers will come from. She'll manipulate weather. She'll fly because she can control the wind. Her super strength will come from the seas and the mountains. And then I incorporated magic into her story by giving her a crystal star that allows her to communicate with her ancestors, these spirits of the Tainos, particularly the mother goddess Atabe, but also allowed me a storytelling vehicle that brought history into the books
Yep.
organically, like it. And I made historical figures, actual historical figures, like her ancestors. So she would communicate with them and give readers a kind of like a taste of history in the context of the larger story without it feeling like a history lesson, but
Yeah.
kind of like, I want you to introduce this character because this is pushing the narrative forward in this direction. So it was really based on trying to find a character that was relatable, a character that was authentic, and then visually, I wanted her to be Afro Latina because oftentimes in mainstream media, well, let's be real, even in Latin media, we are given an overwhelming image of Latinidad that is very Eurocentric. And the thing is, like, we're not one group. We're all groups. We're Asian, African, mestizo, blanquito, europeo, like a whole mix of all of that. Every time I do a talk, wherever I am, I always tell people participating in my lectures or my workshops, look around you right now. This literally looks like a group of Puerto Ricans or a group of Dominicans because we are literally everybody. So it's important that the character represent the underrepresented. And that's why she's Afro Latina.
I
That's why we
love
made her
it.
brown. you
I
know?
love it. There's so many things that I'm hearing, in this world that you've built. I mean, you've got the multi-generational aspect there by bringing in this history and, having her like have this relationship with ancestors. Even the age, it's such a pivotal age where you're kind of going into adulthood. I love that she's also like college educated too, and really focused on making the world a better place, like spot on with Gen Z ambitions and the Afro Latina aspect, which I feel like a lot of folks don't know about when it comes to Latinx culture, that there's even that kind of bias within our
Yeah,
community too. And I mean, I can't believe it's only taken me 13 minutes to bring up Bad Bunny, but that's what I noticed. I mean, his Super Bowl performance is just such a masterclass for so many reasons. But like when you were talking about Afro Latinidad, I noticed that in like his casting choices and everything. I
yeah,
mean, so many people across the spectrum, different skin tones, different
yeah,
hairstyles, like everything. And I think that's such an important part that I think a lot of people don't get when it comes to marketing
yeah.
to the Latino community.
And I think a lot of times it's our responsibility. And let me be specific when I say our. When we're lighter complexioned folks, we have light skin privilege. And we have to be the ones to be championing diversity, and we have to be the ones to remind us, like this very old poem that I grew up with, "Y tu abuela dónde está?" which speaks to our blackness, right? And oftentimes we try to hide that. We try to hide our multiracial identity, or sometimes use it as a crutch. Oh, somos una mezcla. And the reality is like, yeah, podemos decir that we're a mix, but some of us stay in the oven a little longer than others. So some of us are dark skinned. And I can't pretend to say that I have the same societal experience as someone who's a darker complexion version of me who also happens to be Puerto Rican. But I also can say that I'm aware that my light skin privileges gives me opportunity. So when I move into a space as a storyteller, I recognize I'm a lighter complexion Puerto Rican. I'm a man, so I have to push the narrative forward to invest in stories that embrace equity. So the characters are mostly women. The lead protagonist is going to be an Afro Latina, and I'm intentionally doing that because I'm aware of the power of representation, and I'm aware of the power of showing that shared humanity that we all have. Man, at the end of it, if you tell a good story and you create a great character, she'll relate to everybody,
Mhm.
and everybody will see themselves in that character. They don't have to look exactly like her, pero caramba, when you do look like her,
Yeah.
it hits at a different level. Or she looks like your tia, or she looks like your mom, or she looks like your hermana. Because let's be also real. When you look at the Latinx experience, right? Our family's diverse. Sometimes your sibling could be darker than you. Sometimes your cousins, and that's how we were. My cousin Eddie is an Afro Borico with an Afro, and we grew up like brothers. So, and this was normal for
Yeah.
us. So I think it's important that that normalcy is shown in media. And I think what Benito did in the Super Bowl was beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And I think he was very, very well aware of what his privilege is and what his position and his platform is. And he can say a lot without saying it, but just by showing it. And I think that's what we try to do in our graphic novels is just show it.
I love it. I see so many parallels between you guys and especially in his performance and this is something that you allude to also in La Borinqueña is, just bringing awareness to these issues in Puerto Rico that people may not be aware of like, he created the song El Apagón,
Right.
to reference the electricity issues in Puerto Rico, even like making that a key part of his performance too. And then Ricky Martin, singing Lo que le pasó a Hawaii, just
Right.
kind of like, please don't turn this into this touristy kind of location that gets run down. That was my interpretation. So, what are some of these social issues? Can you give us a little bit of context, on the issues like in Puerto Rico that you bring to life in La Borinqueña and also Bad Bunny also brought to life in his performance, like kind of these issues that you advocate for?
Well, I think what I try to do is I try to immerse myself in the content that'll keep the narratives authentic. I listen to Radio Universidad, which is Puerto Rico's public radio, right? It literally plays while I'm working on scripts and working on books. And I'll listen to talk shows and I'll listen to debates and I'll listen to news. I'll read articles. So I don't try to gloss over a lot of these things, or I don't try to find these kind of like themes that have been around for generations. I try to keep everything relevant. And even if it's something, for example, like the Jones Act, I bring it into a space of relevancy now. Like in my current book, Ve Gigante, which is actually the first manga that we've published, there are two issues that I organically threw into the book that are very real. The main character, Brismal, is actually the pilot of this giant robot. She's an undergraduate at the University of Puerto Rico, and she's struggling because this is really happening. The dormitories are being privatized and rent is going up. So a lot of students are choosing to couch surf or drop out because they can't afford to live on campus in the dormitories. And our character is literally struggling with that. And part of the main conflict between the giant robot is with a kaiju, which is this giant monster that comes out of the depths of the Puerto Rican Trench. And there's a massive cargo freighter ship heading towards Puerto Rico from Gainesville, Florida, because many people who may not be aware, because of the Jones Act, that's been in effect for over a century, anything internationally that gets sold to or purchased for Puerto Rico has to go to Gainesville, Florida first. So if there's smartphones or laptops or cars, a freighter ship unloads in Florida, gets put on another freight ship, Puerto Rico pays a tariff, and then that ships to Puerto Rico. So for the last century, easily, Puerto Rico has possibly paid, according to some economists, close to $100 billion in tariffs. And that's money that's gone into the Floridian economy over a century. So these are issues that I try to keep relevant and in the stories. And I'll share one thing, given the anniversary of our first issue. We published that first book in December of 2016. And in my research to find the right story to tell, I decided not to introduce a supervillain and instead was torn between two natural disasters that I should write about. One would be earthquakes, or one would be a cataclysmic tropical storm, because scientists were predicting both to happen. So I opted for the one that would be more visually powerful in storytelling and also can align with the elemental semis, these goddesses and gods, the spirits of the Tainos. And I chose for a storm. And the book's climactic scene, spoiler, is actually a giant storm that leaves the island in a blackout. And that book was published 9 months before Hurricane Maria. Wow. Right? And that doesn't make me a brujo. That doesn't make me some sort of fortune teller. That makes me somebody who actually listens to and reads and studies science, right? So I try to keep a lot of these issues in our book. So even when we did our team up book with Rosario Dawson, and that was a book that was produced with support with the Natural Resources Defense Council. So talk about the entrepreneurial space. That's us collaborating with an established brand, an established institution, right? And they helped us produce this book that focused the narrative around renewable energy. Now, you want to hear something crazy. That book was published in April 22. On the afternoon that it was published, there was a blackout in Puerto Rico, and it lasted through the following weekend. And then that following Monday, our story takes place in Puerto Rico. It takes place in a town next to Ponce. That very same following Tuesday, like not even a week after the book was published, the mayor of that town was arrested by the FBI for corruption charges. The main protagonist in our book was an elected official running for office who was exposed for corruption. So we try to follow a lot of issues and organically put them into our stories. And, it comes off as some sort of like, brujo-ness going on. But the reality is, it's like I follow the news. I follow the stories. In the very first book of La Borinqueña, we were talking about peñuelas. And peñuelas was a hot topic about a decade ago because there was an American company that was using Puerto Rico to deposit and dispose of its toxic ashes. And people in that community were like, yo, no, we don't want this in our neighborhood. And we wrote a story about it. And then our story comes out within weeks. The movement in Puerto Rico goes viral and everyone's talking about it. And then I was actually interviewed by press, and many of the activists that were at that rally and Queriga, the protest in Puerto Rico, started wearing La Borinqueña t-shirts because they were like, someone sees us, so we need to kind of like connect and promote that synergy. So that's something that we've always done. And it's funny that you brought up Bad Bunny, because even though we're completely different mediums and genres, our trajectory has literally been happening at the exact same time over this last decade, right? And but we've always had a narrative that has been tethered to Puerto Rico's social issues, political issues, economic issues. And I've always had this mindset that we need to do something beyond just being a voice and move into the space of even philanthropic work. And we're a very small studio, but a percentage of our sales goes towards our charity work. And in the last decade, we've already raised and awarded over $250,000 in grants to nonprofits throughout Puerto Rico.
Uh, Fantastic. I feel like I just like sat in a college class, just like seeing the effectiveness of the medium of art. So what I'm hearing is, I just feel like so many marketers right now, they're trying to build out worlds, build out stories that resonate with audiences. I think you did it very authentically, to your point, for a couple of reasons that I just want to go over. Is you really immersed yourself, even though you are Puerto Rican yourself, you really immersed yourself in the history, different narratives, different histories, to see what you can look for inspiration. And then, you looked at the issues and you just followed them closely, followed the news closely. You really, I think the main theme here is you were very intentional
Right.
about the work that you set out to do. And I think my hope is that's what people walk away with after listening to this, is just really immersing yourself and being intentional about what it is that you want to bring into the world.
And I think artists at their core are empathetic, and we have an intuitiveness that is different than others. So we see and feel the world differently. And I think an artist at their best and most effective is when they absorb this and create art that reflects that. And a person that comes to mind is my friend Angel Manuel Soto, who is known as a filmmaker. He directed this incredible film called La Granja. He directed a commercial film called Blue Beetle. He recently directed The Wrecking Crew with Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa. But if you look at what he did with that movie, The Wrecking Crew, is a case study for what this conversation is about. He immersed himself in Hawaiian culture to try to create a story. It's a buddy cop movie, but he created a story that was very authentic and true to Hawaiian life and Hawaiian struggles. And that was the underlying line that kept his story so much more authentic. And you've looked at interviews with Jason Momoa and Dave Bautista, they pretty much said this is easily the most authentic Hawaiian project they've ever had the opportunity to work with in their entire career. And it was helmed by a Puerto Rican named Angel Manuel Soto. So I think at its, and I think, and it's something, I mean, it's just weird, but I think it's something about being Puerto Rican when you're literally the product of colonization, and you're and oftentimes are referred to as being resilient, even though that's an exhausting term, because we're tired of being resilient. We just want to be,
Mhm.
right? And if you look at the amount of like art that comes from the Puerto Rican community, given how small Puerto Rico is compared to other nations in Latin America and even the world, we are like in theater, we're in pop music, we're in film, we're in comics, we're in science, we're in law. And it's like, I mean, from SCOTUS to, La Borinqueña, it's like we're there.
Yep. Yep. Mainstream culture. You guys are there for sure. I would love to talk about marketing efforts, but before we get there, I just want to,
Mhm.
one last question here on kind of the cultural aspect. So you referenced it before, your most recent work, going into the world of manga. Obviously, from my knowledge, this is not something super native to Puerto Rico. So how did you hold on to the identity of what La Borinqueña is and bring it into the world of manga? Like, can you talk us through your thought process and what was important to you to keep true there?
So it's an interesting story that I'll share. When I lived in Puerto Rico, in the '80s, I used to love watching this show. And I didn't realize the resonance of the show until like goodness, 40 years later. It was called we called it Mazinger Z, Mazinger Z, but it's Mazinga, and it was the first Japanese import I believe that I was aware of in my childhood. And it's a TV series about a giant robot that actually just recently, like in last year, celebrated its 50th anniversary. But it left such an indelible mark in Puerto Rican culture in the '80s that it resonated decades later. You go to Puerto Rico Comic Con, you still got Gen Xers that are like wearing Mazinga t-shirts or selling like Mazinga fan art. And then you have Gen Z, right? Who are embracing manga. Now, from a marketing standpoint, or even a sales standpoint, if you go to any bookstore now in the United States, or you look at book sales, manga is decimating the Western market of publishing, traditional. It was dominated by companies like DC and Marvel. They combined have about a third of the sales market, whereas manga has about 2/3 of the sales market. And it's a trend. And I teach as an artist children between the ages of 10 to 13. And this younger generation, which is, I guess, Gen Alpha, they are more familiar with manga and anime than they are with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I saw an opportunity to tell a story in an authentic way that could relate to what is not even trending, but is just the now and the continuing future of publishing and storytelling, which is manga. But I did it in a way that was authentic to the medium by working with artists that truly were fans and truly embraced it. An incredibly talented illustrator, Hernan Castellano, of Argentinian heritage, who works out of Colombia. Eliana Falcon, Emmy Award-winning art director from Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico, and gave us a book that was like an homage to this medium, because a lot of people aren't aware that manga is actually reprinted comic books that are very old. So these black and white digests that you buy at Barnes and Noble or Borders, all these other bookstores, are actually collections of books that have been published years ago, right? That's why the books are like 300 to 500 pages long. So what we did a full color version because that's how manga originally used to appear. So I wanted to tell a story that would be intergenerational, would appeal to my generation and would appeal to my son's generation. And we did it. And still keeping to the canon of La Borinqueña, still keeping it tethered to the universe that we're building out, still keeping it authentic to Puerto Rico. So it's kind of like this manga criolla. You know, it's like a sancocho. You're bringing in these Asian and these Latin ingredients to kind of create our own version of something that is familiar, yet still unique and new. And I think that was kind of like the direction I chose to do. And from a marketing standpoint, I studied the market, I understood the market, I respected it, and said, so this is how I should approach it. Still being authentic to the stories I've been telling over this last decade, and also be authentic and respectful to the medium and genre of storytelling of manga. And I think that's what we were able to accomplish with this. And I think moving forward is going to continue to be a case study of how to look at the synergy between cultures, between markets that oftentimes people wouldn't necessarily see. In our home, we're actually a blended family. My partner and wife is Korean American, and she said something to our sons last night. We're at an incredible point in the zeitgeist, in pop culture, where Korean culture and Puerto Rican culture are being celebrated.
Yeah.
And I always joke with my youngest son, we call him the Coricua because he's of Korean and Puerto Rican heritage. And I'm like, when you get older, you're going to be the first Quetón pop star, which is going to be K-pop and reggaeton. And he's like, Dad, I don't rap and I don't sing. I was like, I don't, not now. You're only 10, pero give us some time, right? So it's kind of like this awareness that literally starts at our home, and it goes into the pages of these stories and hopefully into the hearts and minds of our readers and supporters.
I love it. My God, to be a fly on the wall in your house, a Queton artist. I'm going to be laughing about that the rest of the day. There's actual tears coming out of my
Somebody
eyes.
do it and be like, Quetón, mira para allá. You know, right? Annyeonghaseyo, let's do it, right? It's like some Korean and some Puerto Rican slang. Ooh, talk about niche.
Oh my God. Oh, Fitz, you're going to have to edit out all my laughing. This is so funny. That's great. My last follow-up question on this topic is, how cool do your sons think you are? Like, honestly. But
I'm
like,
so lucky. I am so lucky because they actually do think I'm cool. I am so lucky, I have friends that are celebrated actors and artists, and they're constantly like venting about their kids not getting or caring anything about their art. But our sons, like, they do Comic-Con with us. My youngest son writes and publishes his own comic books that we sell. They help me create characters. They get it. They really, really get it. And that's why, like, when I started this 10 years ago, I was of the mind that I want to tell stories that I can read and share with my family. I didn't want to have a situation where I was like, no, get away from the computer. Don't look at the screen. Daddy's working. I didn't want to create comics for me. I wanted to create stories for my family, and by doing so, for all of our families. And yeah, I'm very lucky. And, they help create these characters. So like my youngest son, when he sees Oro el Coquirorado, he trips. He's tripping out. He's like, I co-created an action figure, and he loves that. Or how like my wife, Kyung, she helped create a narrative for this character, making her the first superhero, Luz Luminosa, with endometriosis. And we introduced this health issue into our comics. So I think one of the things that kind of like makes us unique as a family and as a studio is that we embrace our diversity, we embrace intersectionality, and we also embrace this kind of like multidisciplinary approach to being artists and being activists.
Yeah, yeah. For any listeners listening to this, how are you not a fan by now? Is really what I'm asking at this point. That is fantastic. Okay, so I would love to give our listeners a few more lessons from this world that you've built, particularly how to enter it if you're not part of it. So, obviously you have been very precious and intentional, just kind of keeping this world as authentic as possible. And that just naturally means that brands are going to gravitate towards it, and want to take part in it because it's this cool, untouchable kind of story that reaches a wide audience. So why wouldn't a brand want to be part of it? Now, I would love to hear more about the Chocolate Cortez campaign that you guys did, because I think there's a couple of lessons to learn there, because I would imagine, yep, there we go. Looks yummy.
It is.
With La
Especially with
Borinqueña.
some like I always make my own mocha with Cortez chocolate because and I'm
Wow.
spoiled. I can't go to any like coffee shop. I'm like, nah, mejor me lo hago en casa. You
Yep,
know?
yeah. To our listeners, Edgardo was just holding it up, and La Borinqueña was right on the packaging. Now, I would imagine brands probably approach you and all that. Can you tell us a little bit about how that collaboration came to life and what's important to you when partnering with other brands that may not be originally part of La Borinqueña?
Right. What's important to us is that brands have an ethical approach to their work, embrace organically equity in their work. We don't ever want to find ourselves in a situation in a partnership with a company that, will compromise the work that we're doing, compromise the brand that we've created. Cortez as a company is a family company that's been around for over close to a century now in Puerto Rico and in the Dominican Republic with their products distributed across the United States. And they are literally like a farm to stand um, company before that phrase even like existed. And they work with local farmers in the Dominican Republic. They also have farmlands in Puerto Rico where they grow their own cacao and they process their own cacao and make their own chocolate products. And they also have a foundation that is dedicated to education and working with children. And so we immediately saw the synergy with this company, and the company's creative director, Carlos Cortez, immediately like connected with us. And over the course of this time that we developed this project, we not only did stories that were part of the wrapping of these chocolate bars that brought La Borinqueña's kind of like character to the Cortez followers and purchasers, right? But we showed and shared Cortez's story that many people weren't aware of, that they work with children, that they have these farms, that they produce and grow their own cacao. And so that was something that really resonated with us. And they're also dedicated to charity work. And then one of the things that they gave us is that they gave us our first exhibition. They gave us our first exhibition in Puerto Rico, and that exhibition celebrated our work as an independent studio that tells stories by exhibiting original artwork from our comics. And that exhibition has been touring across the United States since. It's been exhibited in Pennsylvania, in New York, in Chicago. This fall is going to be exhibited in Boston. And that's something that really is what we look for in a brand partnership. We also partnered with the Natural Resources Defense Council, one of the oldest institutions in the United States dedicated to climate justice. And they saw the synergy in our partnership, especially because they were doing work in Puerto Rico with renewable energy that no one was talking about. So they thought, well, how do we get people to talk about this beyond just a press release? So we created a story. We literally created a story that talked about it, a book that's taught in classes now, a book that's become curriculum, a book that is actually read across the United States, not just in Puerto Rico. So we have found ways to create synergy and collaborations with brands that push our work forward and elevate them in the space too. And we're right now in talks with other companies in the spaces of renewable energy and other products because they see that we've done something that is unique, that is authentic, and they can speak directly to us. We're not going to have all of these walls of legal teams and executives. Like, you talk to me, you're literally talking to the guy that created this character and decides the direction of these characters. And I think that's one of the advantages of these collaborations. We're a small studio, so we're very, very accessible. And I think that's why we get so much mainstream coverage, from like Fast Company to Forbes to Washington Post to New York Times, because we're doing something that's incredibly unique, but also at the same time familiar, and also decolonizes the concept of publishing. Not everything has to be produced by a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You could actually produce this with a small studio, a literal mom and pop studio, create authentic stories that have the same level of production value, and create impactful collaborations with brands that really resonate with customers and consumers.
Mhm. And I would imagine, like, do you ever turn away brands like
Oh
that
yeah,
try to be part? Yeah, because they
I
just
have.
don't check those boxes that
They
you
don't.
just listed.
They don't. Or they'll come to us with disingenuous methods. They just literally say, "We're looking for the Latin kind of thing," and we're like, "Sorry, we're not that Latin. We're not going to fill that quota for you." And we've turned down opportunities. Sometimes some people might even refer to it as lucrative,
Yeah.
but it's really based on what we believe in, and we look at the bigger pictures. Like, yeah, we could take this check now, but how will that compromise us in the future? And we've created something very small, very dear to us, and we want to really protect it, not only for ourselves and not only for our sons, but also for everyone that supports us and everyone that kind of like expects that from us.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a lot to learn here just about how you're kind of marketing without a quote unquote Marvel budget. That's what
Yeah,
AI told me. I feel like that has a nice ring to it. But you've been able to really get La Borinqueña out there without these massive kind of campaigns or these big studio budgets that you're alluding to. How important is it to you to stay independent and keep control of your IP?
very important. I think it's one of the pillars of our work that we're independent, because it doesn't compromise us. It doesn't also put us in a position that we feel we are having to be accountable to um, board members or investors. We're accountable to ourselves, and I feel that it's important that this model continues to grow so that it can lead by example, so that other independent storytellers or other independent studios or just independent small businesses can learn from this and figure out ways to create a product and create a brand that is authentic and not strictly tethered to profit. You can make money, but you can do so ethically. You can be profitable, but you could also be charitable.
Mhm.
And I think that oftentimes that word is appropriated by corporations under the even rebranding it as so-called corporate responsibility. ¿Qué rayo es eso? It's like, it's AKA a tax write-off.
Yeah.
We do the charity work that we do organically. It's not an afterthought. It's not a PR firm telling us, you look like lizards. We need to make you look less greedy, so you need to give away some of your money. And we're not. I consider us to be working class artists, and we dedicate a portion of our sales to our charity work because we wholeheartedly believe in the power of that. And when we enter into collaborations, that's part of our contract agreement, that this product that we're producing in collaboration with you will also dedicate a portion of sales to continue charity work as well. And that's something that we did when we collaborated with this toy company, Boss Fight Studio. The packaging on the actual action figures literally says a portion of the sales of this action figure will go toward the La Borinqueña Grant Awards. There's no other action figure that's going to
Yeah.
say that. None.
Yeah.
No other
Yeah.
action figure product, no physical product is going to say that. But that's something that we expect when we have partnerships with brands. And
Yeah.
it's also something I feel that brands look forward to, because we give them less homework, kind of in a way. It was like, cool, they handle our kind of like charitable work, and and aligning with them, but they want to align with us, then that actually automatically tells people they're good because they're aligning
Yes.
with La Borinqueña, so we can trust this brand.
Yes, yeah, what a powerful association. So my last question for you, Edgardo, I had given you a heads up. So now after all this, you have established yourself successfully in the comic book world. So I'm very eager to hear, who you see as a rising star in your industry. Normally, we ask about the advertising industry, but who you kind of see as a rising star that maybe us aspiring storytellers should keep an eye on, that something's clicking there.
Right. In specifically the comic book industry, I would say one person specifically, and she works with us. That would be Eliana Falcon, who is actually an Emmy Award winning art director and has her own series of comic books that are kind of like manga influence called Cosmic Fish. And she publishes out of Puerto Rico. And another artist outside of my industry that I would give props to is Anthony Ramos, because Anthony started in theater, obviously with Hamilton, has moved into the space of film, TV, opened a bar restaurant in Bushwick in his hometown neighborhood here in Brooklyn, and is presently working on new music with Sergio George, who's worked with Mark Anthony for decades. These kind of artists inspire me because they embrace intersectionality. They are Renaissance artists. They dabble in different mediums and different genres. And I feel that gives us optimism and hope that as storytellers and as artists, we don't need to always stay kind of like in one specific lane. We can actually try to do other work and support other artists. And I'm very fortunate that many of these artists reach out to us. Anthony Ramos jokingly said when he hit me in a DM and I saw it like a year and a half later, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And he goes, I thought I wasn't famous enough for you to write me back. And I was like, you're bugging, right? And we've had so many artists who reach out to us, like Liza Colon Zayas, who is an Emmy Award-winning actor on The Bear,
Yep.
literally made a video reading from La Borinqueña. I mean, how amazing is that? We already mentioned Rosario Dawson, who's now part of our family in a lot of ways. And we're very fortunate that many artists genuinely see us for the work that we do, respect us, and are true fans. I'm literally visualizing like Ruben Blades in my head. One time I had a beautiful talk with him as we were walking through Lower Manhattan and we went into a comic book store. He picked up my comic and asked the sales clerk for a Sharpie and said, could you autograph it? And I'm like, Ruben is asking me for my autograph. What planet am I on right now? So it's a beautiful kind of like opportunity to be a storyteller that is embraced in this way. And I love seeing the potential in so many younger artists that are out there because it inspires me to see that there's still passion out there for making art that connects with us in a beautiful way.
100%. I think it's just such a testament to everything that you've built. Okay, so now that we are all officially diehard fans, where can our listeners find your work, find La Borinqueña, keep up with what's next for you?
So easiest thing is to go to our website, la-borinquena.com. We're also on Instagram and La Borinquena Comics. You reach us directly. You purchase books from us. Books are purchased by schools, libraries. The Smithsonian actually has our books as part of their permanent collection. The New York Public Library and libraries across the United States have our books in their collection. But when you go to our website and purchase books or merchandise, like from our graphic novels to our action figures, you're actually dedicating a portion of the sales directly to our charity work. And, we're a small studio. So you're not going to find us in these big corporate brick and mortar stores. You're going to have to go directly to the source to find us. And when you do, we obviously are going to be always grateful and appreciative of that support that we get.
Amazing. What a note to end on. Thank you so much for your time today, Edgardo. I know you got a lot going on, so thank you for the time and for teaching us your wisdom. We wish you luck.
Gracias, Luz. Keep shining.
Thank you.